also the way things are going to be aging, the comfort of the guest coming in visiting our hotels. So I think it's a panel of a lot of people getting involved and getting engaged in that new vision about sustainability. And in terms of design, I think it's even better to address this question to our dear designers. But operationally, we are very keen on doing our best to make sure that our hotels are up to date on that question.
Come on, Maria, I can see you're dying to say.
Well, I think in terms of design, we are hospitality designers, and that makes a difference as opposed to office or something else. But as Andrew said, the lifespan of the hotel interiors is anything between, you start doing soft refurbishments in 10 years, and then you go to a total overhaul of the design in 20 to 25 years. Depending on the brand that you're working on, because it does make a difference if you work on the 3-star world or in the luxury level. We work mainly on luxury and 5-star projects. I would say that sustainability for us is longevity. The design, the longer we can make last our design, that equals to sustainability.
Isn't that something that interior designers have always tried to do?
Not necessarily. It depends what kind of designer you are. Because if you follow trends, and let's talk about in interior design is interior architecture and decoration. So if we take apart if we start with interior architecture, and we see it in all the refurbishments we are doing, when you see that rooms and hotels have been planned properly and have been planned with the time in mind and the needs of people there, they last longer. When we go to decoration, if you follow a very specific trend, you could find that you're out of fashion in 5 years' time, and that's definitely not sustainable. So it's not as
a designer will avoid that.
Well, I'm not here to say whether it's good or bad design. We're talking sustainability, and for me, longevity is the first, let's say, answer for interior design to sustainability.
Actually, a point I wanted to make earlier was that the starting point for sustainability is actually renovating something that's already exists, and there are drawbacks, as we know, to renovations. But if you've already got it, then that's going to be a lot better for the project's carbon footprint than building new. Let's just move it on a little bit. What we're talking about net zero. What about how will that influence the design of and the experience of buildings?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's everything. You know, it's starting from the very first stage. You know, if you wanna achieve as close to net zero interior as you can, of course you've got to start at the briefing stage. You've got to start with the building. You've got to start with the building selection. So you've got to work with the landlords to make sure the landlords are providing buildings which are great starting points for designing low embodied carbon, operational carbon interiors. And for us, it's about adaptability. It's really important. I think there's, the two kind of ends of the spectrum with sustainability are longevity and adaptability. And so we want spaces that have real length to them, but also we need spaces that evolve and adapt.
So flexible spaces.
Flexible spaces is very important, and so designing circular interiors is something that is really important, and a lot of our clients.
You mean like round rooms?
Not round rooms. So using circular design principles across architecture and interiors is something we've talked about today already, but that's really important for our clients. We're working with large global organisations who change all the time. The most important, difficult thing to organisations now is the ability to adapt to change, and buildings inherently are not great at adapting and changing. So we're delivering these fixed assets for very dynamic organisations. So with that becomes lots of waste and lots of change. And so the more adaptable we can provide buildings and interiors that change with their users, the less carbon we're going to use to kind of suit that change in the future. And then we develop a much more circular construction economy, which is what's going to really help drive down embodied carbon.
Are you, I can ask all of you, but maybe Adam as an architect, if you start a new project, are you currently setting a carbon footprint budget in the way that we would have a cost budget on a project?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in the future, all of our clients are going to have a carbon budget and a financial budget on their real estate portfolios or on their individual projects, and they're going to be managing both of those quantitative numbers at the same time. You know, and that's the only way that we're really going to hit any kind of science-based targets and really be able to demonstrate that. So, at Perkins & Will, we carry out a life cycle analysis of all of our projects from an interiors perspective. So we're measuring the mass of carbon from REBA stage 2, which is kind of concept design stage. And we can then use the software. We use one-click LCA, which is one of the kind of preeminent carbon lifecycle assessment softwares, to plug in everything that goes into a building, and then from there we can look at the kind of top offenders. So which packages within a project are kind of delivering the most embodied carbon, and then of course we then focus on those top offenders to drive down the carbon as we go through the design stage of the project.
Okay, well we'll get onto the technology a little bit later. Would you, as an architect, hand out to the interior designers their budget? In the same way the project manager might say, right, you've got £1 million to spend on this hotel, and you've got 15% of the carbon budget.
I never would like to be aligned with project managers, to be honest. No, I think it's a team thing, right? In the same way that when you have a budget for a project, you work with a cost manager, you work with all of the design consultants, whether they're interiors, architecture, services is obviously a massive part of this. You know, I don't know how many service engineers are involved over these couple of days, but you know, the service and engineering part of a project is clearly a huge contributor from a carbon perspective. So the whole design team need to be on board as to which direction the project's going on, and how much carbon we feel we can spend to deliver the client's brief.
Okay, so circling back to the original question, which was how will net zero influence the design and use of spaces? Monica, what do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I think in all the discussion about sustainability and sustainable design, we tend to forget the reason why we're all here is the end user, the client in the hotel. We need to focus on designing something that is suitable for the person that will be staying in the hotel, that will ultimately pay for all that. And when you mentioned luxury design, we need to be able to design things that are usable afterwards and that do not impose a certain lifestyle to a client. How do we manage to do something that is operationally easy to use for the staff to do a good service for the client that is staying in the hotel? And how do we do sustainable design and actions without having it too obvious, because people do not want really to be confronted with things. A stupid example maybe, but having the selective garbage in the room, when you stand in front and you don't know what is it now, right? Guests shouldn't be bothered with that. It should be the hotel at the end of the day that is taking care of these things. Details like that. So I would say it is.
Emmanuel, what do you think about that as a representative of an operator? Are we going to have our people cleaning the rooms with their hands in the bins?
I think that there's a lot of things we could be talking about in the room and what happens in the room, but on our side, we try to make guest life as easy as possible, but we also want to make them responsible for their own act, meaning that more and more we go for amenities that are not just plastic bags that you use and throw away. We try to have dispensers now so that people don't actually go away with a little bottle, so we don't have to throw them away.
And would you do that at your luxury properties as well?
We do it, yeah, we do it as well. We have to be smart. We know it's a long path before people get used to these new habits, but yes, we do it in luxury. It's not always easy to make a guest understand that even though he's paid a lot of money for this room, that he's not going to be able to go away with that little Hermes little bottle. But yeah,
Cost factor as well.
it is. Well, it's engaging a lot of people in that, because you have, of course, in terms of manning, you have a lot of people being involved whenever you have to put, all the amenities in the room, the cleaning, changing, replacing, throwing away, garbage, space. So it's not just what you see, it's also what's behind the scenes.
So is Accor going further than, I mean, we've all been in hotels where, don't hang if you don't want your room changed, then, hang up the towels.
But
Is that what you're doing?
Nobody asked the cleaning lady if that is a system that works for her, honestly. We are all having that example of the towel, but it's easier for a cleaning lady to just take it all off and put it back in. So there has to be a whole discussion with everybody involved in the hotel business on whether it makes sense or not in operations.
Okay, well let's not keep it too hotel-centric, despite the fact that we've got a bunch of hotel designers on the platform. Talking about materials in the future of interior design, we have outside in the lobby there some of the suppliers, the copper supplier, Barasol. Where's Damien? I told him I'd give him a plug. He's not even come in yet. Barasol have got some really great stuff that's very environmentally friendly. It also enhances acoustics, lighting, other health benefits. What other things would you suggest apart from the obvious ones?
Well, I'd suggest not specifying all the brand new stuff that's outside the room. It's obviously not what a lot of people want to hear, but in reality, we need to start specifying stuff. We need to, the idea about retrofit and architecture also applies to interiors, and the interior design industry has evolved from a pretty simplistic industry to one that's pretty sophisticated and complicated, and with that comes just stuff, lots of stuff. Which is beautiful and engaging and great for a designer to be involved in that industry. But we also need to clearly reduce the amount of stuff that we make and that we use if we're gonna reduce our footprint. So for me, it's really thinking about how we can reuse materiality and to change the construction industry to be a reuse market first, and to think about buildings as material banks. So the idea, which is kind of complex to apply in reality, but actually is a really simple, beautiful idea, is that we have spent 500 years mining the natural world, and now we need to look inwards, and the idea that our cities already have pretty much all of the resources we need, we were just to reuse those in a more interesting way. And so the concept of urban mining rather than natural mining, buildings as material banks for the next building, is really the concept to kind of reuse first. Rather than
they're great ideas and they're good sound bites. I know Maria has
also achievable though.
Good. Maria, what do you want to say about recycling materials?
I think recycling is good, and especially when we talk about refurbishments, the first thing we do is we go into a building and we say what can we keep, not what can we throw away, but what can we keep, and that makes an enormous difference. I wouldn't go down to the point of having, 2 materials in my interiors or 3, and make it look Spartan, because I would be out of my job here. But what I would say is we would look at locality. I think it's very important to use, to do the research, see what is available locally. And sometimes, even when we work in luxury interiors, it's not really about importing the most expensive granite out of Brazil and shipping it over to the other end of the world. But it might be looking even at craftsmen that are local, look at old techniques that were used in that part of the world, and maybe we can bring them into our interiors and make something that is also belonging to the locality. So there are ways of going around even with materiality.
Yeah, you've done that successfully in your Greek project.
We do it, we try to do it all the time. Obviously, the carbon footprint in interiors is not measured as easily as with architecture. But what we really try to do is to use in all our newest projects, and even in the latest, our latest project, the W in Greece, we only used local stone, and it was stone that was really excavated from the site. And we even tried to use local timber. I'm Greek, and I've worked in Greece. I didn't even know that Greece had local Greek chestnut. And we really used it very successfully in our interiors. Little things like that can start making a difference and then really working locally.
When you say that it's more difficult to measure in interiors, I know that Perkins and Wills have a method in-house, we call them passports, right, to trace materials, and also Accor has a very sophisticated system. Well, you two have been working together actually, collaborating quite well.
Yeah, I mean, material passporting is not a purposeful thing, it's an industry thing. We know we're starting to certainly try and put those processes into our projects. So the idea behind material passporting, as I'm sure everyone knows, is that we put data into materials, which makes it much easier for them to have additional use lives and additional cycles. And we're only going to be able to have buildings that can be reused in the future if we start to see that stuff now, because those materials will then become available resources in 10, 15 years' time. We need to reduce the friction to be able to reuse in the future. So material passport.
So that's coming back again to flexibility of spaces and flexibility of materials and recycling. Yes.
Absolutely. The idea of, I think someone mentioned it yesterday, donor materials. So we're doing projects in London where we're taking steel from one building and we're moving it to another building. We're taking interiors from one building to another and using donor construction materials. Using the kind of organ donor analogy to then give those to other buildings, which is a really low friction way of using embodied carbon.
If you were working in a market that's not, say, the Netherlands or the UK or Western Europe, if you were working in the Middle East or Africa perhaps, where people have aspirations to own beautiful buildings with beautiful things in them, and in my experience, if you try and put recycled timber on the floor, for example, they don't like it because they think that their peers will think they don't have enough money to do the job properly. So how would you tackle those kinds of clients?
So I guess where we're touching base here in the Middle East, we have numbers of materials that are not there at all. When we're talking about concrete, they don't have the sand to make concrete, so they have to have the sand being sent over.
They don't have the sand in the Middle East.
Well, they have a lot of sand, but it's not a good one for concrete.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, there are many materials that are not there, and that we need to actually think about coming from other countries. It's what you see today in hotel and hospitality and design. We see a lot of culture. But in the way of things are manufactured, it's actually not local. It cannot be local for most of it. So I think we need to bear with that. Maybe they have engineers working on this subject because they know that they don't have these natural resources on site. But for the guest, it doesn't have to be a problem. The guests will not understand that, so they have to see things that are...
So how do you persuade an oil-rich billionaire in the Middle East to accept recycled materials?
I think sustainability is becoming a great tool for everyone. I wouldn't like it to sound negative, but especially for the hospitality world, in your marketing to say, I have designed a sustainable hotel. It's good because you will attract a certain clientele, and then you take that further. It's not only your building, you have to think that you want to attract like-minded people, and the experience you want to offer them will be more environmentally friendly, green. You will have your farm-to-table offering in the food. You will have all sorts of other things you might have used in the best possible way the landscape. You might have tried to build as much less as possible by extending your activities on the outdoors and making the most out of the outdoors. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that hospitality could be a great tool for raising awareness for sustainability. That is not just a question behind hidden doors for architects to discuss on an academic level, but we really need to take it to another level with a greater audience. And hospitality has that opportunity to bring in really awareness about sustainability to a broader
So
audience.
it's education, is
So
what you're
it's
talking about. Right?
education, and we see that more and more. This is not just about interior design; it's about the whole hospitality world. But we see that people like to travel, like to educate themselves. They like to open up to other opportunities, to other cultures, to other topics. And I think there is hospitality should really take a greater role in promoting the sustainability issue, because there is an opportunity there.
That leads us neatly into discussing what are coming trends in not only in hospitality, but in residential and in workplace. And what we find in the real certainly is that the skills required now to work in any of those disciplines are very similar. The design aesthetics are crossing over. So what do you think is coming down the tracks towards us? What's the next big thing? Not much.
Well, I have, I've been traveling lately, and I just realized that from one country to another, what is the most ancient is probably what is the most smart in terms of construction. When you go in Greece, little windows, not a lot of openings, keeping the fresh air inside. And there are many places like this where you can actually go back to the ancient culture and see what they were doing at that time when they didn't have AV, AC, IT, and all that we need today. I'm not saying that that's completely personal, but I'm not saying that now we have to go back to these very old little tiny buildings with little windows. But I think
there's an element of reskilling that you
somehow, we need to rescale that to our needs today and our vision as well. So I think again, human being is quite smart. We can be flexible and we need to adapt. So maybe this, in terms of design, this can be one of the solutions, is to see what was done then
previously.
And try to see.
Well, I remember I lived in Singapore for 10 years, and the founding father of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, was interviewed once and asked what he thought was the single most important thing in the success of Singapore, and he said air conditioning. But before that, the colonial era buildings, I know it's a dirty word, but there we are, were designed with wide verandas that and on stilts that would allow the air to circulate. So some of that surely must be coming towards us in terms of acoustics and lighting and plants. There's not a single plant in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think people will need to accept that our buildings can't perform as highly as they have in the past in some areas, and that's okay. Like, just accepting that buildings are going to be a few degrees warmer in the summer can make big differences. And we've probably over-engineered and over-complicated and over-designed buildings, and which is great. It's paid all of our salaries, I'm sure, for a while, which is fantastic. But I think the trend for me is that people just care a bit more now. That they care about the provenance of their food, they care about the provenance of their clothes, they care about the impact of their travel. I got the train here, and on my train ticket tells me the carbon of my train. People care more about their buildings and their spaces and where things come from. They want to know those things. They want a focus away from aesthetic and into impact. So I think the trend is for people to care more, and hopefully that will then mean our audiences want different things. And what luxury is in the future, I think, will be very different to what luxury is now. We look at fashion to tell us some of these things. What companies like Selfridges are doing, Stella McCartney, Patagonia. All of those things are moving away from traditional historical idea of luxury to something that's more about.
So you think that there's a generation coming through that has already accepted all of these arguments and is prepared to embrace them. So coming back to our oil-rich billionaire, surely these days it's now a question of saying to that person, it's not, what's going to happen if I do this, how much is it going to cost? It's what's it going to cost you if you don't do all these things. Is that where the argument is now?
Well, I think the problem with the oil-rich billionaire is the oil bit, but obviously we can't change that. I mean, I think, companies will be penalised financially for their carbon footprint. developments. You know, that is definitely happening. It's already happening. It will happen more. People will have to pay more tax on their real estate portfolios because of the embodied and operational carbon footprint. So everybody always says it costs more to design sustainably, and at the moment it still does. But actually, when you have to pay penalties for unsustainable portfolios, it's going to cost more to design unsustainably. And so companies need to be prepared that there will be penalties for not meeting their goals.
Okay, you mentioned technology earlier on, and we had a discussion this morning about BIM in the architecture and interior design world. It's an important tool, isn't it? Because it follows everything and allows you to have live updates, and you can see things in 3D. What else would you say in terms of technology is helping? What's helping your designers?
Technology and sustainability. Well, again, I'm not an engineer, but for sure, in terms of energy consumption, it helps enormously. We know that there are a lot of suppliers as well at the same time that are looking into materials that are more sustainable. And we are driving the force as well. We are trying to see what is it there that we could use. You see, again, I hate to talk about hospitality, but the problem with hospitality and materials we use, it's great to use just timber, but it won't last that long if you use it on your back counter or on your bathroom vanities. You know, we have to overcome certain issues of maintenance and longevity in the interiors that we do. And we do need to work very closely with suppliers in order to find materials that combine both the sustainability factor.
Stone, for example.
Well, reconstituted stone or anything. I mean, we try to stay away from anything that is man-made, but we cannot do it 100% there because we are in need of very specific materials that will withstand certain uses. So it's hard there, but we are all working towards that goal, I think.
I do think the challenge is a lot of people just say technology is a solution, right, to all these problems, just technology. But in reality, like, data is like oil, you know, like all the data we have around us has a massive carbon footprint to it. So the more technology we lay over things as a solution also has to be considered as an unsustainable layer to the architecture we do as well. I mean, data centers are terrible consumers of energy. More and more are becoming more sustainable, and that's great. But you know, I think it's too easy just to say technology is going to get us out of this. I think actually moving away from technology and making things that are more handmade, more craft focused, all those things are also really important places to put investment as well.
This is something to go back on the designers themselves. I mean, we have all these tools now that makes it faster, more productive, beautiful, but I think seeing designers lose the capacity to design by hand is, for me, very, very sad.
You mean they don't know what a pencil is?
Yeah, sketching. I mean, just when I ask for a portfolio for a designer, I want to see some hand sketches, some artistic views, because they're artists, right? So not only technology, but going back to the essentials of the business. It's like in the hospitality business, the essential is still the love of serving a guest. In the design, it's still the love of being creative and designing by hand.
Well, we had a conversation this morning about how important it is to for staff in a building, whether it's a hotel or an office building, to be as looked after as the people that are paying for it. Because if those people, the cleaners, etc., don't feel they're valued, then why would they extend that feeling towards their guests? I had a walk around PwC's London office on Monday, and they have, up-to-date workplace design. There are lots of booths, and in one of the booths, in the middle of the workstations, were a couple of the cleaners with their mops and whatnot, and their PwC's principle is that, well, they have as much right to sit there as anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, just moving into discussions that are around wider ESG topics than maybe just sustainability. I think again it's super important. Is how can architecture provide social value? A lot of the city conversations that have been had this morning around the social value of a wider area than just a building. And I think all of the projects that we do should be delivering social value as well as sustainability improvements. Of course, there should be equity for people.
Well, there's a lot of SG and ESG doesn't get talked about. It's mostly focused on environment sustainability. Moving it on as we get into the final stretch. Oh, the screen turned upside down. We've discussed a little bit about user expectations and behaviours. Do you have any concrete examples of how the people that you talked about, Adam, for example, who apparently take all this as read, it's striving for net zero, how will they affect the design of a space?
Well, I mean, Monica mentioned it's about audiences. It's about understanding the audience, user-centric design. That really beautiful little video shown before lunch of the young girl in Hong Kong and her, the impact of the environment on her life. That's how every project should start.
Yeah, and interiors have, it's where you live. I always say, because I'm an architect that chose to work as an interior designer, and I can say that, a building, an architect is building a building because we want to look at it, and it's the iconic building, but an interior designer creates interiors that really affect everyday life of the inhabitants. So it has a much more, it's much more related to the psyche of the people that live inside, and it's very important to make interiors that help the well-being of the users.
Are there any
And the users being not only the guests, but as well the employees. And that's why I stress the importance of designing back of the houses as well. Stop saying back of the house, but heart of the house, because the employees do the service to the client.
But in terms of design features, front or back of the house, if we're talking about flexibility of spaces, maybe we don't want so many walls. Banqueting has always had operable walls, but what can we put in place of them? So I saw something recently where instead of a wall, it was a green screen, and they were growing microgreens that would then be used in the hotel's kitchen. What do you think about that?
I love green walls. I think they're great. In terms of design, you have splendid green walls inside, outside. In terms of maintenance, green walls ask a lot of water. They ask a lot of maintenance, and they ask also a certain type of lightings, because you cannot just have any type of light around a green wall. So, in terms of energy, I think it gives you positive energy when you look at it. In terms of maintenance and operationally, it asks you a lot of energy to maintain it alive. Green walls, I think they're meant to be outside, really. We see a lot of them in our design, and they look amazing. Again, I think it's really part of what we could expect of having this nature outside coming inside. But I think we need to push a little bit further to how make these green walls auto-sufficient without having all this maintenance manning around it.
Yeah, just to round off the discussion, let's talk a little bit about how we construct these interiors. There are methods that can be used, whether it's modularity in room or office units, or construction off-site. We talked about that earlier, because that minimises waste and maximises efficiency. If you can design it and build it off-site, but then you've got to get it.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, prefabrication is, it's not a very sexy word, but it is an efficient word. I think it's about designing construction products that are much smarter. So plasterboard, globally used construction method, not a reusable construction method, recyclable but not reusable. So, I mean, an example would be we're working on a large global corporate HQ for a technology firm in London at the moment, 1 million square foot of interiors, so considerable amount of design. And all of the workplace interiors on the working floors are designed from disassembled meeting room units that can be moved around and can be resold in the future. No plasterboard in any of those areas. And so, suddenly we're developing a much more circular solution to what would have been built out plasterboard in the past. A really well engineered and circular and economical unit that can have multiple cycles of life. So, it's really getting down to construction component level is where we need to focus.
Yeah, how do you make a sexy bar front that can be demountable, Maria?
I think that's not the biggest picture here for me is we all know that we will have to live with we all agree that the first thing we should do is we should reuse existing buildings. And I think the question here and the answer to the question would be how can we address from now on the flexibility and adaptation of the buildings that we design even today? Because in 30 years' time or in 40 years' time, even the new builds that are going to be built today, they are going to be adapted into something new. Now, I'm not sure if prefabrication is the right answer, and I'm not the right person to give the answer to that. But I think flexibility and adaptability seems to be a bigger question here, the biggest issue here in terms of reusing our existing buildings in the best possible way, and using them with a change of use in mind. Because I don't know, you have shopping malls that you turn into offices and vice versa, or you have banks that you turn, or educational buildings that you turn into residences, etc.
I think that is such an important point. Adaptability is not everything. It's really utility and its use. So somebody mentioned this morning that 30% of office buildings at the moment in major cities buildings are used about 30% of the time.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how sustainable a building is, if you're not using it 70% of the time, that's the problem, right? So, the beautiful bar in a hotel, it doesn't matter what it's made out of. If it's used 100% of the time, then there's real value in that carbon. But if you're using it for 10% of the time, just for cocktails, for example, then it doesn't matter how sustainable it is. So we need to find ways of using our buildings in more multi-dimensional ways, and that will straight away help to give that carbon footprint, reduce our carbon footprint, because we've already used a resource, so we need to utilise it as fully as possible.
Well, I think that sums it up quite well. I would say that the best international designers, the ones up here on stage at least, have been working in that manner for some time, but we need to do it. We need to get better at it. It needs a bit of thought, it needs a bit of organisation. We have time for a quick question if anybody's got one. There's a man over the back there. Got the glasses off, yes?
I think you all talked beautifully about your concern for quality, to build interiors that are truly sustainable because they're well built, both in the materiality and in terms of the fact that they'll endure, they have a long lifespan. It's a bit of a dirty word, I guess, but I just wondered what the panel felt about the commercialisation of interiors, if I could use the word IKEA. That side of the industry that kind of presents legitimate interiors for everybody, affordable interiors, or interior features, furnishings, and fittings in some regards. But we all know there's an issue with quality in terms of the repetition of it. Is it a dirty word?
So is your point that you would consider a large supplier like IKEA wasteful, or
my view is that I think IKEA, like lots of international organisations, I believe are genuinely trying to create and move towards sustainable solutions. And I'm sure, if I knew more about it, that there are profound initiatives they have in terms of the mass manufacture of their goods. I'm sure there are. I don't wish to kind of defame them at all. I I just
So does
wondered
anyone
what the
comment?
panel's view was about the retailing of interior design for the wider population.
I mean, IKEA are doing some really good profound initiatives actually. They've got a really valuable reuse initiative that they're looking at the moment, and so I think, you know, it's mass production, but they know that it's the same with Nike, you know, like Nike make loads of trainers, too many trainers, but they're trying to do different things. The thing that I don't like is this idea of Instagrammable interiors. It's like an interior is just for this moment, and so for me that's kind of linked to the kind of commerciality of space. It's just, you just got to take a picture of an interior and then that's its value is done. You know, that's very short-term thinking. You know, I want a space that's going to work forever, not just for that Instagrammable moment. So I think, you know, too much stuff still is linked to the IKEA thing. I think less but better is really, you know, a good thing to have in your mind when you're doing interiors.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, so maybe I work mainly for luxury hotels, but a lot of designers we work with actually do a lot of custom made. We don't buy everything off the shelf. There are many reasons for that. First one is, of course, you have something that is identified to the property you're working on and the design concept that you are developing. And the second also is we try to work as local as possible. When doing this, our designers, and we have worked together before, they're really keen on doing that. Having their own design, having a local manufacturer, less transportation, and that's very important as well. This touches a lot of elements: joinery, epiphany, lighting, rugs. So we're quite lucky in Europe, actually, because we have that possibility to do that, which is not the case in all part of the world, but custom made is also for us really important in our design.
Thank you. We're going to have to wind it up here because some of us have transport arrangements which are time dependent. So thank you all very much for being here. We have quite a full room, I think. And if you'd like to put your hands together and thank my panellists here, Emmanuel.